So this video is it's gonna instead of doing a walkthrough of the example third paper like we did previously with the second paper, I'm just sort of combining what I would have done there with another brief-ish PowerPoint lecture on this time we're going to be not focused not on introduction so much, but on the thesis statement, the topic sentences, and the body paragraphs. This is what I really want y'all to get out of this is to see the relationship that exists among these sort of crucial elements of these term papers we're writing. It'll help you sort of conceptualize how they work together, what they, how they're constituted individually, and what they mean overall to the paper. So here is um, the thesis statement, the topic sentence, and the body paragraph, just sort of taken out of the example third paper. And remember, the example third paper is this thing we're talking about here. For those of you, hopefully everybody's had a chance to, review it and work with it since it was part of our blog work last week. But this was a similar assignment that we did a while back. One of my classes did some of my classes did a while back. This was a just a brief visual analysis, similar to what we're doing with our third paper, but some notable differences. But the main thing is the analysis, the rhetorical analysis of a visual. So that's why I thought it would be a useful example for y'all, and that is what we're going to be talking about with this PowerPoint today. Um, Specifically here, thesis, topic, sentence, body, paragraph. And like we've done before in previous PowerPoint lectures, I'm going to sort of slow down on each one of these, show you maybe some things that's working, show you also some places and some ways it could be developed further. And what I'm hoping you'll do is take that then and apply it to your own writing. Um, so yeah, let's do that. Let's go from I don't need to read all this stuff. Um, like we've done again, I want to, how do we go from sort of this thesis statement, topic, sentence, body, paragraph to something that's comparatively more developed and in my opinion, more effective? By the way, I'll make these slides. Bill, I know my head down here is blocking the view. I'll make these slides available also after we're done here at the video. But that's the idea is to this is the writing process, in a nutshell. We draft out some work here and then we work on it some more, which well those will be in the slides later. And then we end up with something that's more effective. And that's what we're going to be working. That's what we have been working on. That's what we'll continue to do for the rest of the semester. So with the thesis statement here, um, it's supposed to encapsulate a main point, some support for your main point, establish a stance. These are things that we've talked about already, previous PowerPoints and videos. Um, and again, we're trying to do this sort of roadmap effect. We're trying to convey to our reader what where this paper is going to go, so to speak, in the forthcoming pages. What are we going to be talking about? Um, so with this thesis statement in mind from our example paper, does it do that? Is it an effective roadmap? Are readers going to be able to read it and get a good sense of what we're talking about and what's coming up in the following pages? Um, so let's examine that. Let's evaluate that. Um, just as a little bit of a spoiler, I guess. I don't think it does. I mean, it does a couple of things well. So what's the main point? Um, I think the only thing in this thesis statement, in our example third paper, that could sort of be A main point. Actually, I don't know. I'm sort of every time I do this, I'm sort of reading into it. As it's written, there really isn't. You have to do a lot of inferring or assuming what the student who wrote this thesis statement means or wants to mean. The only thing I'm going to read here, I've conveyed in this in the only things conveyed in the thesis statement that could possibly relate to main point are the different ways symbols identified from the text that do come up later in the paper might be interpreted and that they are attributing some sort of blame or not. But it's nothing about rhetorical analysis. It's nothing about, some broader, larger context. There's no stance conveyed. Well, here, let's move on. So the main point is not very clear. There could be a main point. It probably is a main point. It's just not clear. Um, so to say, is there some support for the main point? Well, that's hard to say because the main point isn't very clear. But interestingly, there does seem to be some support of something. That's why I assume there's a main point here. It just wasn't made very clear. Um, so the different things that are listed, um, oops, in this thesis statement, seeing the group of black men, their clothes, and a gun as a reason to point out blame, especially for creating killers. These are all in support of something. The student identified some areas from the visual they included in their paper, that album cover, that they were going to write about. Getting back to this first part here, they didn't point that out. This is one of the reasons why this is a good example. I'm wanting you all to take your thoughts and make sure you get them down on your paper. Don't leave them trapped up here. Make sure you express actually what you want to express and try not to leave it up to your reader to guess at what you mean. So there is some support, but it's not clear for what. Um, and then this sort of ties into a main point. How about a stance at least? Some point of view, some assertion, an argument. Um, we get this statement here. It could be equally argued. A lot of students take this approach to writing these papers. It's a way of hedging your bets. They don't want to be seen as quote unquote wrong or incorrect or anything like that. And I hope one thing's been made clear about me at this point, halfway through the semester. I'm not grading your papers or evaluating your writing based on, your beliefs like this. You're free to have whatever beliefs you want to believe. My job, as I see it, my role in your writing is to help you make the best case you can make for whatever case you're trying to make. Um, Help you express yourself through writing most effectively. So please, it's really challenging to write papers like this that respond to our prompts effectively. What you end up doing here is you end up essentially with positions like this on these term papers, you basically end up writing a report for both sides instead of arguing or even if you didn't, come out and say I'm going to articulate an argument, just take a side or establish a stance is much more, I don't want to say easy, it's much more doable to respond to these prompts if you take a stand on something. So that's what's going on with this thesis statement. There are definitely some shortcomings. It does, have some support. It's just not clear for what. So take note of things like this that we're talking about here and go back to your own thesis statement, your own writing, and see what you can see about it. Um, Here, what we're going to do is take this thesis statement and see how we might develop it further. Because that's the point of this, right? Um, what I've done, I was thinking about doing this in real time, but I didn't really know how to do it in a slide. I guess I could have had a Word document up. Um, all of the areas I crossed out, if you'll notice, this is the original thesis statement here. Just take a sort of mental snapshot for that for a second. That's what all the crossed out parts are. And I don't think it's all of it. I don't remember. But what I tried to do was, how can we, or can we, should we, when it comes to revising, do we need to revise everything and make things more clear, or how is it going to break down? A lot of times, getting back to revising, by the way, a lot of times students think that revising is doing something as simple as changing a couple words or correcting spelling. Those are more editing decisions. Revising, think about what that word sort of sounds like. The prefix re means to do something again, basically. And to vise or vision or view, you're viewing your paper again. You're envisioning it again. You're coming back to it again with new eyes. After you've gotten, let's say, some comments and feedback by me, or after you watch a video like this. Um, so taking the crossed out parts, which again were these original parts of the thesis statement, and well, here, let's just read it. Though some racist people might view the group of black men, their clothes, and the gun portrayed in NWA's album cover as reasons that our society points to and blames for creating a culture of killers, I argue that these same visual features in the album art alternatively represent non-racist notions of brotherhood and friendship, family, and survival. Why is this version of a thesis statement more effective than what we had originally? So, and as it turns out, the student who wrote this paper was wanting to write about racism. Um, that's not going on here in this thesis statement at all. We could have probably gotten there by inference or by guessing. But again, let's please not leave it up to our reader to guess what we mean. Our job as authors is to express what we mean clearly, directly, overtly. So that's what a revised thesis statement might do. It might express some of that this is about race over here, mentioning a couple times even in this revised thesis statement. So by adding in some language that's reflective of that, that sheds a whole new and useful light. I mean, imagine going off of this thesis statement without knowing the person who wrote this paper wants to talk about race and racism. You got to make that clear. It's as simple as that. Um, when it comes to this is going to be our next section on topic sentences. But when it comes to this idea of flow that a lot of us are interested in, it's otherwise known as this another idea of logical cohesion. What we want to do in a thesis statement is set up, and that's what this one of the things this original thesis did sort of effectively, is it did mention some things that were going to be talked about in the body paragraphs and that should be talked about in the topic sentences of those body paragraphs. So what we did here in the sort of new and improved thesis statement is we just sort of clarified that a little bit, really made sure of what the topics were going to be in the body of our paper. So that's very important to establish that language. What are you going to be writing about in particular? Um, and then a direct and overt stance. I argue that. So the construction of this thesis statement, though some racist people might blah blah blah, comma. So though this other thing exists, I argue something else. That's the construction of this thesis statement. You're acknowledging that there are other points of view. You are acknowledging that there's a different take on this, perhaps, but you're basically saying, I argue that it's wrong, or I argue that my version's better. That's essentially what's going on here. And this is a very typical, but it's a very effective construction. What it sets you up to do in the body of the paper is bring up these alternative points of view or adversarial or oppositional points of view, lay them out for the reader, and then one by one take them down and talk about why and especially how you and your view is the right one. So now that we've sort of worked on the thesis statement a little bit, um, let's now move on to how this breaks down or what this means for the rest of the paper. And the thesis statement is important for the body paragraphs, but one of the most important parts of the body paragraphs are these topic sentences. This is what each of the body paragraph leads off with. Um, the topic sentences, they transition from idea to idea throughout your paper. I think of them sort of as a little mini thesis statement because often what you're going to find in a topic sentence, or you should, is once again language that is reminiscent of or harkens back, I think I wrote, um, to the thesis statement. So right here when it says, I argue these same visual features in the album art alternatively represent brotherhood, friendship, family, and survival. These four ideas also that they're going to be um, arguing against these other items here in the beginning of the thesis statement. These four items are going to anchor each of the body paragraphs. And that's why this acts like a roadmap, getting back to that idea. We can expect, as the reader of this thesis statement, about at least a body paragraph on this idea of brotherhood and how that's represented um, in the album cover, ideas of friendship, of family, and survival. The way that we get at those ideas in the bodies of our papers is through topic sentences. Um, so again, we're transitioning. When I say mini thesis statement, the reason why the mini is there is because we're not repeating our whole thesis statement each time we start off a new body paragraph. What we do is we'll select one of the topics, and we'll say, some people argue that it's a, group of gangbangers or whatever, but I argue that it's brotherhood. We're not going to do all four of these things in one topic sentence. We're going to slow down and work on one of these one at a time. So we're going to have at least four body paragraphs with at least four topic sentence. Each one has a topic sentence where we're just talking about one at a time. And that's when we do that, we leave ourselves enough room and space and um, connection back to the thesis statement to fully and completely and substantively analyze each one of these ideas as it exists in the case of our third paper, as it exists um, in the visual rhetoric and the rhetorical artifact, in this case, an album cover. So, um, let's see. So let's talk about how the original topic sentence sort of transitions. Um, this topic sentence begins by making a reference to other people's arguments rather than their own, which isn't completely, incorrect or ineffective or anything like that. Um, but is there something else going on in it? One of the most typical arguments people make when it comes to so-called messages of culture being responsible for producing bad things like violent killers through music and especially through art on the covers of music albums as they point to race, the race of the people or people on the album. Okay, so this topic sentence says, here's what other people think. And that's good. Um, but it's like half of a a topic sentence. What about what you think? Where is one of these brotherhood or friendship or family or survival? Where is that in this topic sentence from our example third paper? Um, that's though there is language reflective of the thesis statement in general, that's the problem. It's too general. It doesn't represent um, what the student who wrote it is actually going to be arguing or wanted to argue or wanted to discuss, whether racism or otherwise. So one of the things we want to do is reiterate a main point. And if you recall from what we were critiquing about the original thesis statement is there wasn't really a main point. And that's why it's so important to compose an effective thesis statement right off the bat. If your thesis statement is deficient in certain ways, more than likely it's going to affect the composition of your topic sentences. There's a there's like a domino effect there. So you want to put forth an effective, you sort of, you know, thesis statement that does all the stuff that it's supposed to do. That way you can take from it as you build your topic sentences. Um, and here, this is what I was getting at a second ago. The focal point of the paragraph isn't established. And in this way, it doesn't harken back to the original thesis statement. That this topic sentence does not act like a mini thesis statement. So there are a number of references to support. Um, it's unclear what precisely might end up comprising the paragraph subsequent to the topic sentence. In other words, if we were just going to go based off of this without the part that I say is missing, the I argue that part, these are some of the questions that the reader might be left with. So what does all this have to do with anything? What does this have to do with the album cover? What do you, as the author, have to say about any of this? All you're doing is reporting that there are people out there who have a particular point of view. And if that was going to be the main focus of the paper, it would have been laid out in the introduction and expressed in the thesis statement. But that's not what's going on, or that wasn't what was intended anyway. And then here, no stance is indicated. So um, it's not to say that this topic sentence is just bad. It's incomplete. We need a little bit more information. And similar to what we sort of did before, the crossed out parts are again the original, and we're looking at how we might um, make this more effective to anchor a body paragraph and a body paragraph of visual rhetorical analysis. Um, so let's just read a little bit. Regarding racists' views that a so-called culture of killers is produced through the art on the covers of music albums like NWA's based on the race of the people on the album, I argue instead that portrayal of black men actually points to a non-racist notion of brotherhood. So notice what we're doing here. We're pointing out in the same way that there are people who will um, get all bent out of shape and cry about album covers. Racists will do this and point to the race and what's going on in the artwork, etc., to argue that's what's wrong with the world. But this student said, I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to argue instead, so against this, that this portrayal of the black man on the cover is brotherhood. And this goes back to, sorry for scrolling, we're talking about one item here from the thesis statement. We're hearkening back to it. We're pointing to our stance, and we're indicating how we're going to what our point of view is going to be, what is going to happen in this. Essentially, this student says, I'm going to argue that this view, this racist view, is garbage. It's incorrect, and here's what it is instead. If I had to critique this further, I think the only thing really sort of missing from a topic sentence like this would be what is the talk about rhetoric. What role is rhetoric playing in this? You could be a little bit more overt with that also. But that's what you want to do. That's what a topic sentence should do. Again, I hope you can see that it's not that the original one was wrong, totally. It's that we needed a little more. Let's see, do I want to say anything else about this? Just to drive this point home, we're only talking about one of the elements that we set forth in the thesis statements. We're not talking about all of them. We're not trying to mush everything together into one paragraph. We're just taking it one at a time. After we do this paragraph led off by this topic sentence, we'll go ahead and compose another topic sentence for our next body paragraph, and so on. That's the idea. So when it comes to the actual body paragraph, in other words, after, we have the thesis statement, we have the topic sentence. So what do we write about then in the actual body of the paper? Here's what the original says. On this specific album cover, there are five black men, and just because they are black, that is supposed to mean that violence and killing is okay. What if all the men in the picture were white? There would probably be a different message being sent by the picture, not to mention the words might say straight out of Portland or Iowa or something. But if they were a different, oops, if they were a different race, it's like people would be getting a different message. Is that part of the message the picture's fault or the person who sees the picture's fault? So there are a number of interesting things going on in what was the body of this paragraph, the substance of this body paragraph, I should say. Um, a couple of things I want to touch on here. Um, After the topic sentence, it is quite typical, quite conventional to spend some sentences. There's no rule for it, but you're wanting to situate the reader further into the discussion that you're going to have. Um, So if this your topic sentence where you say that there are racist views that that blame people of particular races, um, they blame society's ills on them as portrayed in album covers. If you're going to do that if that's what you're going to be talking about in the body of your in the body paragraph after the topic sentence, talk about that a little bit. Give your reader a little bit more information about what that is, where that came from, how'd you come by that knowledge? You know, so the so what question. Preview that a little bit that you'll probably end up concluding your paragraph with. But um, if you just jump into topic sentence, then boom into an example or a quote or paraphrase, whatever it happens to be, it's a little bit abrupt. Try and build a little bridge from topic sentence to the actual example that you're going to be taking. Um, in this body paragraph, the example is going to be about the men portrayed in the album cover. So that's going to be in focus. That's going to be our example from the text. In this case, since it's a visual analysis, we're not going to be using quotes or paraphrases, but a description. We'll use a description. Um, So go from topic sentence to example. How do you get there? How do you build that bridge? What do you need to say to your reader in order for them, once they once they come across your example, the evidence, the proof of what you're talking about from the visual, what needs to be said to them so they'll be on the same page with you? Once you Once you present that to your reader, this is the analysis part. And this is one of the reasons why this body paragraph fell so short. So I have full and robust elaboration of why and how the example chosen, in this case, it's the people, the five men on the album cover, how this relates not only to the point of the body paragraph, but the overarching main point of the paper. So let's go back to our topic sentence. Racist views that culture of killer is produced by, um, in this case, the folks that are on the cover of this album. If that's what's going on here, where is the discussion of why and how? Why is this related to that in the topic sentence or overall um, in the thesis statement? Why is this moving? Why is this compelling? How does this have anything to do with racism? Even if it's obvious, even if it's self-evident, take many steps to lay it out clearly. Lay it out clearly, lay it out plainly, so it's unmistakable what your point of view happens to be. And so you leave your reader with no doubt as to why you think this particular example from this particular album cover means something having to do with race and racism. Okay. Um, you'll want to do this often and in numerous sentences in that body, your body paragraph, plural body paragraphs, this is all it should be. Why is this significant? How is this rhetorical? How is this when an audience member um, when an audience member sees that album cover, why are they going to be why is their thinking going to go to race and racism? How does it work that when they see that album cover, and again, as you're hearing me talk about this, this is just the example third paper. You're going to be wanting to do this with whatever rhetorical or with whatever visuals you've chosen for your third paper. This is the idea. You don't want to compose a body paragraph consisting of a bunch of questions, especially if you don't provide answers to those questions. What the student did here, again, it's not that these questions are bad. It's not that even this moment here that was, on one hand meant to be a little bit humorous, but on the other hand, it was a serious point, a very serious point. This student, oops, could have and did should have ended up. I mean, you could take this point right here if the when you're trying to get at the rhetoricity of something, how something is rhetorical, this is a great way of doing it. What if? What if the people on the album cover were white guys? How different would that be? That's exactly right. But don't leave it for your reader to figure it out. You tell them how different it would be. Do the same thing with whatever visuals you've chosen. Try to think of it in the inverse or in the absence of something or with the addition of something. Think of it in different ways. Why is the particular arrangement that was chosen the thing that's effective or the thing that gives people a problem or the thing that you agree with or disagree with or what it happens to be? And then how does it work? How does it work to produce the effect that you think it produces? All of that will contribute to pointing out the significance of this one element here. We're talking about the people portrayed, and we're talking about it being an example of not contributing to the ills of society, but it's a symbol of brotherhood instead in this example. Um, Here, I just wanted to show you for a moment when you have now this developed topic sentence regarding racist views that a so-called culture of killers is produced through the art on the covers of music albums like NWA's based on the race of the people in the album, I argue instead that portrayal of black men actually points to a non-racist notion of brotherhood. That was the developed, the revised topic sentence. But here I have the original body paragraph, and you can sort of see how incongruous they are. We got this big part right here. I argue that there's no argument coming forth here. There's a bunch of questions, sort of leaving the reader to figure things out on their own, and other things going on that we've been talking about. But I wanted to do this because I was hoping you would see the sort of starkness of what revision can do and can mean to a paper. So, let's work on then developing or revising the rest of this body paragraph and see what we can see with it. Maybe we can come up with something that works more effectively with this revised topic sentence. Um, and here I'm basically just talking about what I mentioned a moment ago. It, it's probably a more effective practice if you get in the habit. If you want to ask questions in your writing, like this student does here, and for this body of this paragraph, I hope I don't regret saying this. It's okay to do that. Try not to do, first of all, so many. I mean, it's all questions, pretty much. Maybe one. Far more effective is to supply answers to those questions. One of the ways that I learned how to do this a long time ago was one of my professors told me, leave your questions in, but write answers to them. And then once you go to revise that draft, take the questions out, and you'll be left with just your assertions. You'll be left with just your claims. And that's great. And sometimes the questions can be sort of blended in with your responses, and it makes a more, I don't know, sort of aesthetic look to your writing. But the questions are good if for nothing else, they help you generate ideas. But you'll definitely want to answer these questions. You don't want to just leave questions in your paper because you don't know how your reader is going to answer them. For all you know, your reader could agree with the racist point of view in this example. And that's not where you want to leave them. You want to try and take and convince and persuade through your deployment of rhetoric. You want to convince and persuade your reader that your point of view is the superior point of view. So as we look through and revise the body paragraph, I'm going to try and use a little bit of color coding again, like we did. I know that doesn't always work. Sometimes that can be confusing, but here, these are the portions that we talked about for a body paragraph. We want to take a moment after the topic sentence to situate the reader, to provide them with an example, to elaborate the relationship between the example and the main point of your paper, and the significance. These last couple of parts are all the whys and the hows. And so um, this is what here's the revised topic sentence again. Here's the original body paragraph. Notice there's no green. There's no situating the reader here with this original body paragraph. And then the blue is, like we just talked about here, that's the example provided from the artifact, in this case, the visual. Okay, so at least that's there. Um, and then getting to the sort of main point, or what we think was the main point based on the original thesis statement, etc. That's this pink part. The gray was, I was generously saying that this was trying to get to the significance of what this student was trying to write about, and it was. It just was incomplete once again, or underdeveloped. But that's what the sort of anatomy of this example body paragraph looks like. Um, what I've done here is like we did before. These crossed out parts were basically they were basically the parts of the original body paragraph that we could work with, that we could build on. A lot of the questions were just sort of taken out, or they were turned into statements. They were turned into claims. But that's one way of looking at what we can do with a body of a paragraph. Here I have it color coded, but that's hard to read. I'll try and read it from here. So, regarding racist views that a so-called culture of killers is produced through the art on covers of music albums like NWA's based on the race of the people on the album, I argue instead that the portrayal of black men actually points to a non-racist notion of brotherhood. It is quite common for people to make assumptions and draw conclusions, especially when it comes to the things they don't know much about. People have opinions about music, who listens to it, and what that does to a person. This is the situating that I'm talking about, right? When these opinions begin to circulate widely, they can eventually have heavy consequences. The controversy surrounding album art, like what is on NWA's album, is a good example of this. All right. Do you see how we did? This was a great transition by the student. We've helped situating the reader here after the topic sentence, and now we're going to lead right into our example. To begin with, we can see five black men on the NWA album cover. This very fact sets the background for my argument that conclusions based on album covers can oftentimes be breeding grounds for racism. Brilliant. This is, you make your stance clear. You're saying something else about the example that you're going to use from the visual. This is all great stuff here. And then the rest of it is the significance. You're expounding on the significance. But is race really the deciding factor in such a conclusion? If all the men in the picture were white, for example, notice here I didn't put what if, because I'm not asking a question anymore. If all the men in the picture were white, for example, there would probably be um, a different message being sent by the picture, not to mention the words might say. This was the student trying to take their um, questions and turn them into claims and turn them into assertions. Portland or Iowa or something. In other words, if they were a different race, it's like people, especially racist people, would be getting a different message. This part of that message is not the picture's fault, but the person who sees the picture's fault. What I mean is that when I look at the same picture, I don't see black men symbolizing a so-called culture of killing. I see an example of brotherhood. So just when so just when it comes to the messages that are sent in picture, like NWA's album cover, what one person or a racist sees does not necessarily mean it's the only way to see it. Sorry, I had to duck out of the way so I could read it. As much as this is an improvement by the student over the original body paragraph, here we'll go to this color-coded view. Um, Once again, the rhetoric, the discussion of rhetoric was largely implied. And there were a couple of moments where it kind of went in that direction a little bit more overtly, but I want you to be very overt in your discussion of rhetoric and what you think these different elements or these different mm, rhetorical features that you're pulling out from your images, what they're doing rhetorically, the effect that they're having on the viewer or the audience. Um, Talk about that a lot. And if you think that you're gonna, boy, I'm really beating this to death for good old, Justin, do it more. I want to see lots of discussion of rhetoric. That's what this whole third paper is going to be about. Um, that's pretty much it. We could do this for all the paragraphs and everything, but that would be a not so brief video, even though this one's probably already not so brief. Let's see. I have some final thoughts here. I've probably talked about most of them. Let's see. Keep in mind, I always feel like I have to say this. What we just talked about here was one student's work through revising their draft. This is not the only way this can be done or should be done. This is all I was trying to show you with this is what the writing process can look like, what revising can look like. Can, not should, not definitely will, not if it doesn't or else, or if it it better or else. This is just one of the ways. You are going to come up with far more interesting and unique and different things to say about whatever images you choose to rhetorically analyze. Um, I must have mentioned this, 20 times in this PowerPoint. Try not to leave things up to your reader to get, to infer, to guess at, to assume. You tell them. You be very clear about the things you want to tell your reader. Um, I don't think I need to say this, but topic sentences should lead off all your body paragraphs. The kinds of topic sentences we've discussed multiple times now in our videos and course materials. Um, Indented body paragraphs, by the way, please indent your paragraphs. Um, this is important here, this point. I should have highlighted it or something. When you get to expanding on the significance of whatever you discuss in your body paragraphs, please feel free to find moments, find opportunities to include yourself in that discussion. I'm not saying to substitute in your own opinions or insights or experiences. Don't substitute in for rhetorical analysis. You need to get that done. You need to do the academic part, the rhetorical analysis in this case. You need to do that. But as you're doing that, or after you've done that, somewhere in there, try to relate, try to convey to your reader why this is meaningful or impactful or important to you. Your voice is the thing that makes your writing yours. It's the thing that makes it worth doing. And I definitely want to see that in your writing. I mean, you should want to see that in your writing. So take opportunities to do that, please. Try not to think of what we're doing here as some kind of template to follow, some kind of a how-to manual. I do want you to have topic sentences leading off your body paragraph, so I guess in that case it is kind of template-y. I do want your thesis statement and your topic sentences to have a sort of congruence or resonance with each other. Um, just try not to strictly follow exactly everything that we've done in here. That's not really the point of this. It's just to show you one way that writing can be developed further. And I finished off here with some links that might be helpful to some of y'all. Okay, hope this is helpful. Um, Let me know if you want to talk about any of this.